Good evening, and on behalf of the Granville Historical Society Board of Trustees, welcome to the 2025 annual membership meeting. We are honored to have with us tonight and we are excited to share the accomplishments of the past year as we look forward to the future. Following the business portion of the meeting, we'll be immediately having a keynote speaker, very engaging and very exciting this evening. I am Eric Yazanoff, and I've had the honor of serving as the president of the Granville Historical Society for the past 2 years. Please let me begin with a brief recap of recent highlights and take a look at what we are working on for the upcoming year. Over the past 2 years, the Granville Historical Society has undergone significant renovations, all aimed at protecting and preserving the historic museum on Broadway, originally constructed in 1812. While last year our focus was mainly on the museum interior, this year our attention turned outward. We completed a full restoration of the nearly 150-year-old iron fence, which was sandblasted and repaired. These repairs are expected to extend the life of the fence for at least another 50 years. Additionally, the overgrown garden, previously filled with non-native species, was removed and is now being replaced with native plants. The only exception being the historic Granville Rose, which was brought here from Granville, Massachusetts, in Little Cutlings in 1805 by the original settlers. As this new native garden matures, educational signs will be added, creating a living outdoor exhibit space to teach visitors about the plants that are native to our area and that thrive. There has been numerous additional exterior projects that have improved the existence of the current building. These projects and many others were made possible by the generous support of members like you, as well as the Granville Community Foundation and the Licking County Foundation. We are also beginning a rebranding effort. After many years of using a multicolored logo, the Society is transforming to a simpler, more iconic design that better reflects our dual responsibilities as a historical society and a local museum. The new branding identity will be rolled out throughout the coming year. On the exhibit side, 2025 has been a standout year. Our mid-20th century kitchen exhibit occupies space made available by the recent renovations on the inside of the museum. It provides an interactive and audio-rich experience. For many visitors, it brings back the nostalgia of the 1950s, and for younger generations, it evokes memories of their grandparents' home. This exhibit is intended to be permanent, but will evolve slightly each year to remain fresh and engaging. We also launched a major exhibit titled Granville and the Civil War, which will continue through the 2026 season. It features artifacts from our extensive Civil War collection and tells the story of Granville's veterans and Company D of the 113th Ohio Volunteer Infantry in particular, because that unit was made up entirely of Granville soldiers. Through maps and narratives, the exhibit follows the journey from enlistment and training to key battles such as the Battle of Chickamauga and Sherman's March to the Sea. Another 2025 exhibit featured 19th century furniture, showcasing items commonly found in historic homes around Granville. All the pieces were either manufactured here in Granville or were owned by Granville residents. These are just a few of the highlights of the past year. Beyond exhibits, the Granville Historical Society continues to offer high-quality programming, such as this evening, maintaining the collections, preserving our historical documents, and publishing the crown jewel of the Granville Historical Society, the Historic Times quarterly newsletter. It's been a busy couple of years, but we remain committed to our slogan and to our motto. Quote, as a community's collective memory, the Granville Historical Society acquires, preserves, and shares Granville's past with residents and visitors to inspire curiosity about, install its knowledge of, and foster a commitment to our shared history. Looking ahead to 2026, we will build on this momentum. As part of the next phase of the rebranding, we will be overhauling the website to improve navigation, accessibility, and digital engagement. with the goal to make the site a true resource for researchers, families, educators, and visitors alike. You may have seen this year's annual fund campaign focusing on exhibit technology and preservation updates. These enhancements will be implemented throughout 2026. We have already begun experimenting with auto integration into the exhibits and museum space, and we aim to expand these efforts, leveraging new technology to make the exhibits more engaging, more interactive. We are also investing in the long-term care of our archives and collections, ensuring that they have the proper tools necessary to secure, protect, and preserve Granville's history. Additionally, an exciting initiative to be funded by the annual fund will be the creation of a permanent exhibit in the new lobby area, a high-level interactive overview of Granville's history and the history of the Granville Historical Society's museum. Thank you in advance for your generous support of the Granville Historical Society's annual fund campaign. Several additional exhibits are currently in development for the 2026 season. 7076 Granville and Granby exhibit, an exhibit exploring what the original 1805 settlers of Granville were doing during the American Revolutionary War in Granville, Massachusetts, and Granby, Connecticut. This will be part of a nationwide, statewide, and community-wide celebration known as American 250 to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Additionally, the Missed Connections, Transportation and the Making of Granville, working title, will explore how transportation development, or the lack thereof, shaped Granville's identity. From early auction wagon travel to the town's missed inclusion in the canal system and the national road, the late arrival of the railroad system, all the way through the highway era, Granville's path was shaped by what passed through the community as much as what did not pass through the community. This is going to be a very exciting exhibit, also part of the America 250 celebration. Additionally, we are working on extensive exhibits on Lorenda Munson Bryant and Thomas D. Jones, a 19th century sculptor, both two remarkable individuals from the Granville area whose stories deserve to be told more widely. These are currently in the works. And there are several other exciting projects that we are working on as far as exhibits, including collaboration with the Granville Rotary and with Denison University. Excuse me. One quick note about the America 250. The Granville Community Foundation is leading a year-long community-wide celebration with activities and events hosted by individual organizations throughout the year with a theme each month. There's information on your table if you'd like to learn some more, and you'll be hearing more about America 250 in the coming months. I'd also like to quickly recognize Billy Zimmers, who is from the Community Foundation. Sorry to catch you off guard there, Billy, but she is the coordinator for Granville's 250, and so we appreciate all her efforts bringing all the community organizations together for this great initiative and celebration for next year. The Granville Historical Society could not do what we do, offer educational programming, preserve our community's heritage, operate a museum, and serve this community without the support of members like you. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for your continued involvement. Thank you for your generous support. Just thank you very much, and have a good evening. All right, so the next slide is actually our treasurer's report. Kim Manley, our treasurer, was unfortunately unable to make it this evening, so I am reading her report. If there are any questions regarding the report, I encourage you to email our general information email account, and Kim will promptly respond to your questions. But here is our treasurer's report from Kim Manley. Tonight's treasurer report is based on the full year fiscal results through 2024. Total revenue for the year was $131,000. Key sources included $31,000 from the annual fund campaign, $13,000 in membership dues, $32,000 in grants, including a $25,000 grant from the Lefevre Foundation, earmarked for computer upgrades and building improvements, $35,000 in refresh project donations, $6,000 from the sale of the Young artwork, 1,600 in interest income, and nearly 11,000 in miscellaneous donations. Revenues exceeded expenditures by 55,000. Much of that surplus has already been invested in 2025 towards the refresh projects and computer upgrades. As of December 2024, our endowment stood at 496,000, including 52,000 in unrealized gains during the year. Your continued support of the Historical Society is deeply appreciated and remains essential to our mission, and a more detailed report will be published in the first quarter of the Historic Times. Thank you, respectfully, Kim Manley. All right. Again, if you have any questions, please email our general information email account, and Kim will respond promptly. At this point, I'd like to invite up Chip Moats, who is the chair of our Constitution and Bylaw Ad Hoc Committee. If you recall, we had some constitutional amendments last year. As a result, we have some bylaw amendments that we have to follow through on. Chip.
I get the exciting part of the program. So most of it is, as you know, we changed the Board of Managers to the Board of Trustees. So we updated everything in the bylaws to make those two documents match. But the majority of, how do we change the slides? So the majority of the changes to the bylaws are basically clarifications or additions to the bylaws to set forth things like the trustees can be an ad hoc. The trustees can be on ad hoc committees and oversee special projects or serve as an officer. That wasn't set forth previously, and now it is. I'm not going to read through all these things. You can read through them. But basically, we have just made changes to the bylaws to make sure that, well, I'm sorry, actually the largest and most important thing is we created 4 committees: a development committee, an exhibitions committee, programming, and publications. Those weren't previously set forth in our bylaws, and that's probably the biggest thing that we've done. Everything else flows from that, and the one additional thing that we changed that is new for the society is that we can now vote by email, which is, if we can't meet as a group, this has made it very easy for us to decide things for the society. Do we have any questions regarding these changes? Any objections to the changes? Yes?
I would like to propose that instead of the exhibitions committee, that the archives and the collections committees be recognized as important to the functioning of the society, whether or not an exhibition is using them.
So you're saying we should create 2 more groups?
Yes.
Okay, we'll take that under advisement for next year. Thank you. Anything else? I move that we approve these and amend our bylaws. Any objections? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chip. Now I'd like to invite Vice President Elizabeth Wilson, who also chairs our nominating committee with our Board of Trustees nomination slate and leadership nomination slate.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Wilson, the current Vice President, and I'm really excited to present our slate of nominees for the Board of Trustees, as well as our officers. Yeah, perfect. So the nominating committee recommends the following people, either appointed or reappointed to the board. First, we have Cynthia Court, who's currently emeritus. She serves as the collection committee chair and has previously served as the Granville Historical Society president. She's nominated to serve on the board following her many years of experience in collections, as well as archives at both the Historical Society and Denison University. The next nominee is Heidi Drake, who currently serves as the Old Academy Building Special Project Coordinator and has moved us so far along in this process. we would like to nominate her to continue her work to complete the successful transition of the old Academy building to the village of Granville. Janet Procida has formally served on the Board of Trustees. She currently volunteers in the archives and has been nominated to help the Historical Society with coordinating youth engagement, special programs, and archives. And finally, we have Jack Wheeler. He currently serves as the Publicity Committee Chair, and in this role, he would transition into a more administrative role as our volunteer coordinator and working on community outreach. So I would like to entertain a motion to, can I get a second? Okay. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Our officers, we have nominated Cynthia Court as president, Chuck Peterson as vice president, Amy Welsh reappointed as secretary, and Kim Manley as well to continue as treasurer.
I move that we approve the board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'm not opposing, but I'm recording this. Who was the second? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, and I'd like to introduce Nanette Macy-Junes to come up. Yeah, you. Yeah.
Okay. All right, how are you guys? Are we all have to get up and do jumping jacks? No. Okay, so it is my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker tonight, Leslie Greene Bowman, who is President Emerita of the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, which owns and operates Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home. Monticello is the only presidential home or slave plantation in America that is included on the UNESCO's list of World Heritage Sites, which we love World Heritage Sites, do we not, in Licking County? Yes. Monticello is also a member of the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. During her 15-year tenure at Monticello, I told her I wouldn't go on and on, but I'm going to go on and on for a minute. During her 15-year leadership at Monticello, at the Jefferson Foundation, she spearheaded the foundation's vision to bring history forward into a national and global dialogue, propelling restoration into national and to bringing history forward into national global dialogue, propelling restoration, dialogue, and programs that offer a full and comprehensive view of our aspirational and complicated past. Prior to being at Monticello, Leslie was the executive director of Winterthur at the Winterthur Museum in Delaware. She has spent her entire career as a museum person. I'm a museum person, so I love other museum people. She has also authored 2 books on American decorative arts history and enjoyed academic appointments at USC and UCLA, where she taught American decorative arts history, while curator and being assistant curator and assistant director at LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum. She spent her adolescence here, her teenage years here in Granville, so she's a graduate of Granville High School. She went on to get her bachelor's at Miami, so she stayed in Ohio for a while. Before returning, she actually got her master's at the Winterthur program at the University of Delaware, which is kind of nice considering you then go back there as the director. But Leslie frequently comes back because until very recently, of course, her mother lived here for many, many decades before we lost her recently. So Leslie, here's what we're going to do. We are going to show a video. Alex in the back, who is our tech chief and board member, we're going to see it's about 14 to 15 minutes about the journey that Monticello has been on. Then we're going to drag chairs up here, and Leslie and I are going to have a conversation about Thomas Jefferson and things that we know about Thomas Jefferson. Listening to her tell you things she knows is just remarkable. And then we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A. Does that make sense? Okay, all right. Are we going to like lower the lights too? Maybe, because some of us don't see as well as we used to. I don't. Because I can't see it at all. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Better. Can we turn these off? That might be beyond us. Okay, Alex would like to be honest. Forget that minute. Can we see it? Are we good enough? No? Can you go full screen? I think we can see it. All right, ready? Ta-da. We do have to have
Began in
sound.
1768, the year Thomas Jefferson began leveling a small mountain and building his plantation home. However, Jefferson inherited about 40 enslaved individuals in 1764 when he reached majority at age 21, which is also when he inherited the lands he would develop into Monticello. Thomas Jefferson was 33 years old in 1776 when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, famously proclaiming, "All men are created equal." His words have echoed in freedom movements around the world. Yet over the course of his life, Jefferson enslaved more than 600 people, about 400 of whom worked at Monticello. The institution of slavery was central to the operation of a plantation, and the South depended on a plantation economy. Slavery was therefore the primary economic engine of the South. Directly or indirectly, all 13 British colonies in America depended on it. While enslaved people like Burwell Colbert, Edith Hearn Fawcett, Isaac Granger Jefferson, and indeed Sally Hemings were central to Jefferson's life and legacy and Monticello's operations, the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, the institution responsible for stewarding Jefferson's legacy since 1923, remained silent on their lives and impact for decades, euphemistically referring to them as servants. Public tours and exhibits focus primarily on Jefferson's accomplishments and ideals, with little or no mention of the hundreds of enslaved people who lived and worked on the mountain. Also denied or ignored was Jefferson's paternity of 6 children with his enslaved housemaid, Sally Hemings. But then in the 1980s, under the leadership of Monticello's new president, Daniel P. Jordan, historians and archaeologists at Monticello began to devote their attention to studying slavery on the plantation. They excavated dwellings and workshops, and one historian, Cinder Stanton, devoted her career to the study of the families enslaved by Thomas Jefferson. In 1993, she initiated a project to locate the descendants of these families and capture their memories and stories. Monticello called the project Getting Word.
Meeting these people that we haven't even shared family connections that we weren't aware of. I have now met Liberian distant cousins that are now living here in America.
In 1993, and based on the new research, Monticello began offering a second tour about slavery called Plantation Life. But tours remained silent or dismissive of Jefferson's connection with Sally Hemings and her children until DNA research was published in 1998, linking Jefferson's DNA to the descendants of Sally Hemings. President Dan Jordan appointed a research committee to review the findings, and famously quoted Jefferson in vowing that Monticello would follow truth wherever it may lead. The committee's report was and remains publicly available, and its conclusion that Jefferson was the likely father of Sally Hemings' children was integrated into Monticello's interpretation. When Leslie Greene Bowman succeeded Dan Jordan in 2008, the foundation was no longer silent on slavery, and research was continuing. The Getting Word project had identified hundreds of descendants, and Monticello had begun hosting reunions for them. But all of this work was going on behind the scenes. It wasn't evident to visitors. The physical evidence of slavery was gone. Bowman began her work to reveal Monticello's history with slavery in partnership with Lonnie Bunch, then director of the Smithsonian's new National Museum of African American History and Culture. Together, they and their staffs teamed up to produce an exhibition on slavery at Monticello and the museum's galleries at the American History Museum on the Mall in Washington.
It's important to remember that really until recently, the last great unmentionable in public discourse was slavery. All right, this was the kind of thing that if you wanted to end a dinner party, if I brought up slavery, the party ended. So for me, I realized as I was trying to create the African American Museum, I said, what are the things that are really important for the American public to grapple with? And for me, the question of slavery was really at the heart of that discussion. And it was at the heart because it was the kind of thing that said, here is what slavery means to African Americans, but equally important, here's what it means to all of us. And that my notion was, how did I create an opportunity for people to recognize that the story of slavery, be it at Monticello, be it wherever it would be, was a story that shaped us all. And so that's really what sort of got me thinking about how do we work together. And then the goal was to work with the best place in the country, Monticello. Well, I think that what you have at Monticello is sacred ground. And there's something powerful about telling a story on sacred ground. When you create a museum, you're manufacturing sacred ground. Here you actually had it. And the notion was that I can remember my first trips to Monticello learning about servants and suddenly recognizing that there wasn't an understanding of how important this community was to Monticello, but to the world itself. And for me, what Monticello did was actually say, we will be the beacon that will force institutions, especially historic sites, to grapple with one of the biggest challenges, which is to really understand how central slavery is, how it shaped both white and black residents of Monticello, and how if Monticello could really help people see this in a different way, it would have a ripple effect around the country. And my goal was to figure out, how do you have the greatest impact you can do it? And that's what Monticello was able to do by working collaboratively with the museum.
This stunning proof that the public was interested in learning more about slavery propelled Bowman's goal to restore the physical evidence of it back at Monticello. Restoration of the landscape of slavery began in 2014. Other changes were initiated, including an award-winning Slavery at Monticello app that helped visitors picture the lost buildings as they listened to descendants tell their stories. But the public criticisms and private challenges were still acute. Not all the press was positive. The fullness of Jefferson's and Hemings' strokes were too difficult to discern in Monticello's hallowed halls, and the press took notice. Monticello retained Values Partnerships in 2015, a Black-owned social impact firm led by Joshua and Michelle Dubois.
Values Partnerships is the country's largest Black-owned social impact agency. And what that means is we help clients unpack tough, thorny challenges that they're facing, challenges that might threaten the security or future of their institution, but also challenges that impact communities as well. And we were so, I don't know if delighted is the word, but we were full of hope when we got that call from Monticello. We knew that there were some really tough things to unpack here. The legacy of slavery and race at that place, a legacy that had not sort of been fully dealt with. But we immediately thought about the impact that it would have if we could solve this puzzle, this challenge, if we could bring the voices of the marginalized, the people who had been enslaved on that mountaintop to the forefront, what that would mean, not just for Monticello, but for our country and for certainly the kids, like my kids, who would come behind us and see that place. And so we were delighted to get that call from Leslie and team, and it began some really important work.
Together, they developed a multi-year plan to reveal the lives, dignity, and stories of the enslaved community. A plan that included communications and media strategies to engage audiences of color. Monticello hired its first descendant as a communications officer. Gail Jessup White is descended through two lines from both Thomas Jefferson and his enslaved tradesman, Peter Hemings. She became a powerful spokeswoman for lost voices. Bowman and the Values team rallied board support, and in 2016 initiated an early covenanting on race in America in the form of a public summit, in partnership with NEH and the University of Virginia. Called Memory, Mourning, and Mobilization, Legacies of Slavery and Freedom in America, it drew nearly 2,000 people from around the country. After the success of this convening, Monticello continued with plans to restore the evidence of slavery. It was a quote from Values team member Michelle Dubois that ignited them.
We were delighted to work with Leslie and really, kind of seed the idea for the first summit, the Memory, Mourning, and Mobilization Summit. And that was just a phenomenal event where we grappled with some of the most difficult subjects imaginable, but that was threaded through with real joy. And then, we knew we needed to go further and to go deeper. And it was actually in a meeting with the Monticello leadership, including Leslie and myself and my wife, Michelle, that Michelle, who's our company's president, reflected that the only person whose brand and whose voice and whose legacy rivals that of Thomas Jefferson is Sally Hemings. And it would be an important thing as well as an opportunity to put more weight and to put more attention behind her name and her story. And from that grew the idea for the dedicated exhibit that focuses on Sally Hemings and her family. And that was another sort of pivotal moment in this journey.
Bowman began to raise funds and commission designers for a multimedia exhibit on Sally Hemings in the dark, windowless room in which she had lived under the house. Bowman invited strong descendant participation in the planning and relied on an advisory committee on African American affairs that included independent scholars. She did not want a period room with historic fittings, but a powerful, immersive exhibit. The resulting experience is 5 minutes in length, narrated only by the words of Sally Hemings' son, Madison, as told to an Ohio newspaper in 1873.
Well, it was important because the subject of Sally Hemings got a lot of attention when my book came out, and then the following year with the DNA testing that was done, all eyes were pretty much on Monticello because they are seen as, this is Jefferson's place, the home of Thomas Jefferson, and they had a message for the public, and people were paying attention to the kind of message they put out. It's not like this was, lots of times there are academic subjects that are written and it circulates just among academics, and it doesn't have sort of a wide dissemination throughout the public, but this was something that everybody was paying attention to all over the world.
These two streams, Getting Word and Sally Hemings, came together in a landmark celebration in 2018 called Look Closer, when Monticello invited the Getting Word descendants to reunite to celebrate the restoration of the landscape of slavery and the unveiling of the Sally Hemings exhibit. Monticello's Board of Trustees hosted 300 descendants for a special dinner on the lawn, where many of their ancestors had been sold after Jefferson's death. The public took notice, with the Washington Post and New York Times noting, "Monticello's journey from that point has been anything but linear. The institution continued to make major strides on these issues. But the same institution that was once criticized for not doing enough on race and slavery was now lambasted for doing too much, with Fox News saying, Jefferson Madison's homes become woke monuments, attacking founding fathers' legacies, and visitor to Thomas Jefferson's Monticello estate calls out new woke tours, depressing and demoralizing." However, beyond any short-term political or communications considerations, the longer-term vision was clear. Monticello had the responsibility to tell the whole story. There is much work left to do, and the journey continues to this day. But progress on telling these stories and restoring dignity to the enslaved community has been unmistakable.
I really think that the challenge for museums, the challenge for cultural institutions, is to be bold and be brave. That in essence, most institutions in some ways are conservative in the way they approach things because of donors and the like, and they're afraid of alienating audiences. What I found is that what Monticello has demonstrated to us is that if you tell a story well, if you tell a story in a way that's expansive, that's open, but that's clear, what you find are people saying, I get it, I want to know more. So rather than see institutions run away from this, I want to see them grab this and say, this is central to who we are in the future.
can see it. All right. Are they on?
Yep. Good to go.
Here comes Leslie, the important one. All right. Oh, okay.
Testing.
Whoa, look at
Keep
this.
that mic down here.
Well, if you put it down here, though, nobody can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Um,
You're good? Okay.
All right, so Leslie. Indeed, I want to hear more about Thomas Jefferson. One of the things that Leslie told me when we were chatting was, I don't want to tell you what to think about Thomas Jefferson. That I want to provide you with information so you can think about what you think about Thomas. That's your journey to go on. But you told me such fascinating things. I am fascinated to find out more about Thomas Jefferson. In fact, I foolishly thought Thomas Jefferson was like a bad business guy, which is why he didn't have any money, but that is not the truth. So tell us, you've just spent so much time thinking about Thomas Jefferson.
And I hope this ignites all of you to ask the question you wouldn't have asked the guide at Monticello. How many of you have been to Monticello? Okay. So I'm not going to ask you if they were called servants or slaves or enslaved people, because we've been on a journey, right? Language is actually really
Tell
important.
them about, I've had a lot of older people saying, why do I have to make that change? Why do I suddenly have to say enslaved people? Why do I have to, what's that about?
Okay, so if I flunked out of college, would I like to be called a flunky the rest of my life? So why would you call someone by a circumstance that was imposed on them against their will? A slave is a person first with human rights and dignity. That person is not and should not be identified by a condition that was imposed on them by others. So if you call that woke, hey, I'm sorry, but I'm there. If I'd been in that community of enslaved people at Monticello, and I spent a lot of time thinking about that, my life and my attitudes changed as a result of working in a place that brought these tough histories together. Everyone is a person first, and they deserve to be acknowledged that, right? I think. Maybe you don't agree, but so we began the transition to call them the enslaved community, enslaved people, but they're people. They were women, they were wives, they were sisters, brothers, children, workers, fathers, uncles. They had families, they had religion, they had aspirations, even within the bounds of their confinement. So I probably have said enough on that. You can tell how I feel.
I think it helps people. It helps you just like, it makes you think about why that's important.
You asked me, did we die in debt?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody remember what happened between Napoleon and President Jefferson? I like making things interactive, plus you're all historians. So something kind of happened to change the size of the country. Anybody? Louisiana Purchase. Doubled the size of the country. Not a single shot or any weapon was used. Now, that's another lecture. And the Spanish were riding from Madrid. They were tearing to get to Paris to stop it. They did not want Napoleon. All Jefferson asked Napoleon to do was, please sell us New Orleans, because we'd like to control the Mississippi River and all that trade. And Napoleon needed money. He was, in the middle of these wars, kings were getting a little tough. He had
Wars get
Haiti.
expensive.
Haiti was like rebelling. He had another front in Northern Europe. He had too many fronts in the war. So he was like, you want the whole thing? And Madison is writing to, and of course it takes a little while for these letters to go. And Jefferson knew he had no presidential authority. They hadn't thought about that in the Constitution. He did not have time to go to Congress to get approval. Now, I kind of hate to say this in our current political environment, but he pushed executive privilege, and he just did it. And he paid for the Louisiana Purchase what Monticello had to pay for just that little mountain next to us that looked over us in 2004, $15 million. But in 1804, he doubled the size of the country. Now, how does this get back to debt? And then that's looking at me like, oh my God, she's gone off on me.
No.
Okay, you double the size of the country.
This makes sense, but I never thought of it.
Napoleon's war ends, right? Who is sending all that? What is the breadbasket of Europe at that point? Guess what? It's American farmers. Why did they switch from tobacco to wheat around 1800? 1790s is actually when they make that switch, because it's so lucrative. Napoleon needs to feed his troops. So suddenly, all these American farmers, their land prices are going up. They've got all this wheat. They're selling to Napoleon. The Napoleonic Wars are over. And in 1804, Jefferson doubles the size of the country. What do you think happens to land values? Oh, somebody's going down. And what was Jefferson's insurance plan? He's a planter. He's a Virginia planter. What do you think his money is in? He's got 4 different plantations. He thinks, I'm cool. I can support Martha and Martha, his daughter. He's long widowed. His wife died in 1782. They'll sell Poplar Forest. They'll sell these other plantations. It will be fine for Monticello. 1819. All you financiers out there, even those who are looking at your IRAs, your retirement accounts, his land values, the country in 1819 went through a downturn. A bubble burst. Napoleon's gone, we're not selling wheat, the country's opened up. Land values went in Virginia from $60 an acre down 4/5 to $5 an acre. What does that do to your net worth? So people say, oh, he couldn't manage money. He wasn't Hamilton. He was off drinking French wine. He was doing all this stuff.
Okay, he did drink French wine.
He did drink French wine, but he switched to Spanish and Italian when his.
Very political about the wine. Okay.
So anyhow, he did die in debt, which is also why he couldn't free his slaves, because they were collateral in his debt. Okay, next question.
Okay. So, but were other people thinking he was a bad business guy? I don't know. I learned that somewhere, and I kept carrying it on. Talk about. He is a very complicated figure. I mean, he is someone that is so important to us in so many ways, and he was human. And this complicated. I mean, we want to make our heroes like almost, they're on a pedestal. They did no wrong. They weren't human, but they are human. We want to be like them. We want to be like them. But I do think the humanness of Jefferson and the complication of who Jefferson was is at the heart of who we are as a nation and who we are as Americans. And how do you talk about that? I mean, you told me this fabulous story about Jefferson in Paris, and that just turned me on my head, that idea of him rethinking certain things. Just talk about Jefferson as a complicated, anything you want to talk about.
No, and I'm going to start it with a thought that most people haven't thought of about Jefferson too. So I'm going to put him even higher on that pedestal for you first, and then I'm going to take him off, okay? Jefferson is one of only 2 founding fathers who thought internationally, right? So Adams and like most of these guys, they're just trying to, I mean, I'm sorry, 13 colonies, they literally knew they were either going to succeed or they were going to hang. We have no understanding of the risks that were incumbent upon them as they began to literally think about treason. This was treason. This was civil war. The revolution. Oh, the 250th is coming. Oh, we were so. This was treason. Understand that. This was sedition. And they put their lives on the line to further a we the people, right? Something that had never really succeeded for very long in the world. Jefferson, of that group, he and Benjamin Franklin were the only 2 who were international citizens. And Franklin was much more international, like science and philosophy, and he was known in Paris. He was the most famous American in the world. Jefferson had been studying Locke and studying in antiquities and studying Montesquieu and studying Horace and studying all of the philosophies of the republics. Jefferson was thinking about a global. This ball of liberty is now so well in motion, it will roll round the globe. Right? Think about that. Think about what happened, which is why when the French Revolution starts happening, he's like thinking, this is great. He has no idea how bloody it will
He's how
become.
old? 33 years old, or 35?
33 when he writes the Declaration of
33
Independence.
He's
33 years old.
Yeah.
So we've got him up on that pedestal now even more. And your question was, you know, the complications of all that. And he writes against slavery from the beginning. In the Declaration of Independence, he tries to include a grievance against George III. You know, the Declaration of Independence, what you all know is this much of a long document. It's actually an extraordinary thing that he wrote that preface, because all they needed was a divorce decree. All they needed to do, this little committee that Franklin put together, they couldn't get money from lenders in Europe if they didn't renounce, right? You got to be separate from England. I'm sorry, France is not going to give you money if you're still British. Neither is Amsterdam, neither is any other country. So in order to get the revolution going, they needed to declare that they were done with the United Kingdom, with Britain. That just had to be, this is why we don't like you, this is why we're leaving. Jefferson, again, the global thinker, put these words that nobody looked at in the Continental Congress. Oh, that stuff at the beginning. They were focused on the grievances. And one of those grievances was slavery. You imposed slavery in these colonies. Jefferson wanted it then to be accorded and recorded as a grievance. It didn't belong here. It shouldn't be here. When Continental Congress evaluated it and changed things, they took that out because the southern colonies wouldn't go along with it. But they didn't really look at all that mumbo-jumbo in the beginning, all that sort of philosophical stuff. Oh, fine, whatever. They changed other stuff. But it was Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln said, the man who had the clear thought in the press, I'm paraphrasing, in the press of conflict to incite words for all time. So I'm putting him back up on that pedestal, right? Even higher, because I think he deserves it. But he also deserves to be acknowledged and accepted as a human being who changed his mind, who got things. There's two things I don't forgive him for. We'll talk about that later.
We're going to end with the two things she doesn't forgive.
Okay, so he rails against slavery. He calls it a despotism for both the master and the enslaved person. He wouldn't have said enslaved person, but you know why I am. And then he's in Paris. Now, you know why he's in Paris? 1782, after 10 years of, his words, blissful marriage, his wife dies after childbirth, and he is in such a morose, depressed state. Washington and Madison and Adams and Franklin all sort of say, well, Franklin's actually already in Paris, but we got to get this guy. Like, he's having headaches all day. He won't speak to anyone. And they get him to Paris to help negotiate the treaty with Britain, except it's over by the time he gets there. And he ultimately becomes the next ambassador, the next minister plenipotentiary to France, succeeding Franklin. They get him to Paris, and Franklin comes home, and he is there on the verge of the French Revolution. He is the ringside seat to the incredible wealth gap between, sorry, it's turned off though, my phone's turned off. He's there looking at the monarch. I mean, he's literally accepted into Louis XV. He's introduced, right, at Versailles. He is absolutely front and center, looking into the eyes of the gap between the destitute peasants and the aristocracy. And he's thinking about this, and he's writing about how much better America is with our ideas about equality and opportunity and pursuit of happiness, right? And then there's a point where he takes a break from Paris because courts shut down or whatever, and he takes, he makes this famous trip around to the vineyards, but that's another lecture. But he's on a road outside Paris, I think in a little one-horse carriage. I mean, he's looking like an aristocrat. He's an ambassador. And he sees a woman along the road, and she's destitute. And he stops. She can't believe he stops. And then he comes up to her, and she's terrified. Like, no one of his class would approach her. She's in rags, she's dirty, she's starving. And he talks to her and wants to know about her situation. And then he gives her money. And she breaks out, and we only have his own account for this, so you can take it with a grain of salt. But he gives her money, and then she literally breaks down on the ground in front of him and kisses his feet. And he never forgets that moment. Now, he doesn't write about it very much. It's in his writings that this happened. So this is just my own view. But here's what we do know. After he comes back from Paris, he doesn't continue to try to stop slavery. Now, there are lots of reasons for that. There's like, it's becoming too difficult. You can't pay to get them all back to Africa. The mortality rate is so much less in this country than the Caribbean, blah, blah, blah. But up until he went to Paris, he kept going on about, we have to end this. He stops doing that. And he actually makes a comment to someone that his own he doesn't say enslaved, his own family, because he actually referred to his slaves as his family, had blankets, had food, and so I think there was an aha moment there, that he realized if he freed these people who had no education, many of them, it was not legal for a slave to be taught to be literate. He let his grandchildren teach his enslaved people. But I think that moment in Paris was when he realized if we freed, what we would be like, there would be this destitution. What would we be consigning them to? We have no place for them to succeed. Not that we would call success a lack of freedom, but it's so complicated, right? I mean, we think freedom means everything, but what does it mean if you have no way to make a living?
Yeah, the difference between the pursuit of happiness and, yes.
Yes, no way to pursue happiness. Exactly
Yes.
right. I think he realized he had no way to solve that problem.
And then you were saying to me that you thought that he gets active in the amelioration movement. You were talking about, I'd never heard of I feel foolish, I'd never heard of this. And then you also thought that maybe he thought over time it would dissipate. So talk a little bit about that piece, because that was interesting.
So when he comes back from Paris, he becomes part of, I wouldn't say he was a big advocate proponent, but he begins to evidence the amelioration movement, which was to give enslaved people better housing, better treatment, let them live as families in one dwelling, not in a bunkhouse with, and he very much participates in that at Monticello. There's two sides to this story. He tries to keep married couples together. He will buy a husband or a wife to get them to Monticello, or vice versa, sell. And fair enough, that's also economically to his benefit, because those children are valuable when they're sold. And Virginia was one of the largest states producing enslaved children that were then sold to the South. So I don't want to romanticize this, but he was part of that sort of, how can we treat them more as human beings and make sure that they have some chance of, pursuit of happiness? Maybe not, but yes, he did. I rail against him that, people say, oh, well, Washington freed his slaves in his will. Well, actually, he only freed his 12 slaves. The rest of Mount Vernon's slaves belonged to his very rich wife, Martha. And he gets all the credit for that, but it was only 12 slaves. It wasn't 120. And those 12 slaves, everyone jokes that they were like not making tea for Martha because nobody wanted them to poison her. So because they were not going to be freed until she died. So this whole business of who frees whom and when and the economics of it, it's just so hard to wrap our heads around.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it's really complicated.
So I want you to tell us the two things you're not going to forgive him for.
Yeah.
And then it's about a quarter, by the time you do that, it'll be about quarter after. And then I want to leave plenty of time for people to ask questions, because I think people are going to want to have you talk some more. So
Should we talk about perhaps Sally Hemings' descendant in Granville for a minute?
Yes. Sam's ready to ask, but he doesn't have to. You could tell. So we think.
Well, Sam and I talked today.
Okay, so tell us about that, and then we'll do the wrap, and then we'll do questions. Yeah, we have something very Granville to tell you. Maybe, we're not.
So thanks to Nanette and Mike Kennedy, and then today Sam Schneid, I became aware that there was a woman living in Granville named Edith Johnson, who in the 1970s was very certain that she was a descendant of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Now, I'm going to use that as a jump point to tell you a little bit more about Sally Hemings, because I have a feeling most of you do not know that Sally Hemings was Jefferson's wife's half-sister. Some people are nodding, some people are going, what? What? So Jefferson's father-in-law, John Wales, was a slave trader, and he owned Sally Hemings' mother, and Sally Hemings' mother was his, in the period they said, concubine. And in fact, Sally Hemings' mother was the closest that Jefferson's wife, Martha, had to a mother. Her mother died in childbirth. She was raised by stepmothers that she despised, and Elizabeth Hemings, Sally Hemings' mother, was the woman who actually was the most maternal and caring for her. And on her deathbed, Martha Jefferson made Thomas Jefferson promise he would not marry again. Now, you can look at an economic reason for that, and you can look at a romantic reason for that, or a maternal reason for that. If you think about it from Martha Jefferson's point of view, and they were by all accounts an incredible couple. They recited love poems to each other as she was dying. She feared the stepmother she didn't like raising her daughters, right? So that's, she didn't like her stepmothers, and she was not comfortable with her two daughters perhaps suffering that same plight. She also knew that if Jefferson married again and had a son, her daughters would be cut out of inheritance, right? Because that's the way it worked. So for various reasons, she asked, and Jefferson agreed, and he didn't ever marry again. So fast forward, Jefferson's father-in-law dies, and they inherit most of his wife's family's farms, plantations, and enslaved people. The one family his wife wants to come to Monticello are the Hemings. She was raised by Elizabeth Hemings. She knows the Hemings family. She's close to them. They're her kin, literally. And they come to Monticello. And Sally Hemings is 4 years old when she comes to Monticello, only a year younger than Jefferson's wife's daughter. Jefferson's daughter and Sally Hemings, there's a whole other lecture on that I've written, grow up together at Monticello. Sally Hemings is 3/4 white, and she is half-sister to Jefferson's widow. So when Jefferson goes to Paris and takes one daughter with him to get a French education, leaves two daughters behind. One of those daughters, the youngest, dies at age 4 from whooping cough or something. He is so bereft. He says, I want my other daughter with me in Paris. I want my family whole. That child, Mariah, her nanny happened to be sick, so they sent the sister of the French, the enslaved man Jefferson took with him to learn French cooking. Everybody know, like, we could talk about wine, we could talk about Cody's first founding foodie. Jefferson took an enslaved man with him to learn French cooking. He was planning ahead. Like, I'm going to Paris, I want somebody to cook. So he takes James Hemings with him and puts him in cooking school. And so, of course, the family says, well, let's send Sally, as her brother's already there. Sally gets off the boat at about 13, probably looking something like his wife. She's 3/4 white. So where was I going with that? Edith Johnson was Mike Kennedy's grandmother's cook in Granville. She's buried in Welsh Hills Cemetery. She said that she was descended from Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. I can't prove that based on the research that's been done to date at Monticello, but we're going to keep working on it. She's not yet in our database. We have connections to over 1,000 descendants of enslaved people who worked or served at Monticello. Obviously, the Sally Hemings Thomas Jefferson piece is sort of the royalty of the enslaved families of Monticello. But bear in mind that when Jefferson passed away, he couldn't, yes, he could have. He could have given Sally, he, I'm sure, influenced his daughter Martha to give Sally her time. That's a very weighted phrase. If he had said she's free, then they had to give her a certain amount of money and get her out of Virginia, because the threat of slave rebellions in Virginia was such at that point that you couldn't free slaves unless you either vouched for them or you gave them enough money and they went out of the state. So it was, I mean, again, it's just so complicated. It sounds so, oh, why don't you free, like, oh, no, it's really complicated.
But he does free the two.
But he frees all of Sally's children.
Yeah, and two of them stay with their mother.
Yes, they do.
Until she dies.
So I love this about Jefferson. You can say, and again, I'm not going to tell you what to think about him, but he's endlessly interesting and intellectual and brilliant and complicated. He kept his agreements. One of the other reasons he died in debt was he had signed for a friend's loan, and when that friend defaulted on the loan, he paid it. He promised his wife he'd never marry. He never married. He promised Sally Hemings in Paris. Okay, this is a fateful moment. A lot of fateful moments in Paris. You should go to Paris. He is in Paris. Does anybody know the state of servitude, involuntary servitude in Paris in the late 18th century? Slavery's been abolished. There's no slavery in Paris. So when the ambassador from the United States arrives at Marseille or Nantes or wherever, wherever he arrives, he has to sign what property he's bringing in, just as you would today, right? He doesn't record James Hemings or Sally Hemings as human property. Kind of embarrassing for the guy who writes the Declaration of Independence, right? He's no fool politically. He records them as servants. He pays them wages in Paris. They are treated exactly as wage-earning servants. There is a free African community in Paris of about 20,000 people at that time. They have people in a network they can access. He says to them, we're going home. Partly because his daughter, older daughter Martha, decides she wants to be a nun. Jefferson wasn't big on the Catholic Church. He's like, oh, no, I think we're getting this girl home. He thinks he's coming back to Paris, but the French Revolution is heating up. We know he never gets back to Paris. President Washington makes him Secretary of State. He never, if you've seen Hamilton, like, what did I miss? But he comes back, and he says, of course, we're going home. We're going home to Virginia, guys. It's time, pack up. And James Hemings, who is Sally's older brother, 8 years older, says, I'm not coming. Oh, no. I'm free here. Now, he had to file a legal petition, but he and his sister could have stayed in Paris and been free. And I want you to think about that choice. What an inhuman choice to have to make. You can stay in Paris and be free, or you can go home to the family you love and be enslaved. Your brothers and sisters, your aunts, your uncles, your mother is still alive at Monticello. You got a choice. You can be free in Paris, and they both had trades. He's obviously a French chef, and she's learned to be a seamstress and a housemaid, and that's a really tough choice. That's it.
Because you don't ever get to, it's not like you can never go home again. It's not like, never go home again.
And they stand up to Jefferson. James has an easier, so what does James negotiate? He says, I want my freedom. I will come back with you. If I train someone else at Monticello in French cooking, you will manumit me. And they actually sign it. Jefferson kept that agreement. Nobody had to keep that agreement in the United States. It was legally completely unlegislated. You didn't have to honor it. No court would have approved it. What does Sally negotiate? Why wouldn't she negotiate her freedom? Oh, I love this audience. You're looking so interested. Okay. What good is freedom to a 16-year-old African-American girl? What good is freedom? Okay, here you are, guys. I want you to get a little ashamed. What good is freedom to any woman in the 18th century without money? They have nothing. Freedom is worthless. I have a lecture where I start, what is success to a man in the 18th century? Title, property, stature, lands, all that good stuff. What is success for a woman? To be attached to a man with
Title and money.
property. You needed the best you could do, unless you were Martha Skelton, who married George Washington, because she had independent means. But if you hadn't inherited money as a woman, your best bet was to find a kind, prosperous man who would care for you and your children. So Sally Hemings does not negotiate for freedom in Paris at age 16. She negotiates for special care and special privileges, but she negotiates for something that should make her one of the pioneers of the emancipation movement. What she should be known for, instead of Jefferson's concubine, she got freedom for her children 50 years ahead of emancipation. She sat there at age 16 and negotiated one of the most powerful men in the country and says, I want freedom for my children if I come back with you. And he honored it. She got it. He only freed 9 people through his lifetime. 4 of them were her children that survived.
That is amazing. All right, now, because I am an old museum director myself, and I know people go, oh my Lord, we're going to be here.
Sorry.
Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We are going to have you tell us the 2 things you don't forgive him for.
Okay.
Then we are going to take 1, maybe 2 questions, so that people feel that they want to go home, they get up. But Leslie will linger, and you can come up and ask more questions. It isn't that she's not going to ask questions. I just know that people, we're going to bring it to a close at 7:30. Tell us the 2 things that you do not forgive him for.
Well, what do you think the first is? He didn't free slaves. He didn't free slaves. And he couldn't legally. But could he have just left a letter for us that said, I would have if I could have? Come on, Tom. You knew it was wrong. You wrote so eloquently about how wrong it was. Just leave me a letter that says, I would have if I could have. So slavery is the easy one.
Number 1.
That's number 1. Limbs
Number
large.
2.
I spent.
The number 2 is great. Number 2.
But number 2. So, and this is not a trick question, and I don't expect most of the audience to know it. But
It's very personal, though.
But Jefferson's home at Monticello is his autobiography, because it's not a boyhood home. It's not a plantation that he inherited. It's not a home he got from the next. He planned every detail of Monticello. It was his dream. He played on that hill as a boy, and he told his best friend, I'm going to build a house here. And I'm sorry, by 1772, you do not build your house on a mountain when all the fertile soil is at the bottom. And by the way, all the water is at the bottom, too. Your wells don't work very well at the top of a mountain. So it is horrendously more expensive, the labor to get everything up that mountain. The only reason they put stuff on mountains was protection. Forts, castles. We got to see the enemy. Where are they coming? I'm sorry, by 1782, we do not have, other than some Native American unrest further west, we don't have protection issues. He was a dreamer. He was a visionary in wonderful ways. He put his front door on Rome and his back door on the West, because he believed in the West as the safety valve for the country, right? So where was I going with this? Sorry.
You're going to tell us
The
what
2
you
things
do
I don't
not
forgive him for.
for.
Okay,
This
so
is the
he
second one.
builds Monticello from scratch, literally from the clay in the ground, designs it himself. There's no other presidential home that's so acutely personal to the character. Who does he use as his architect? Anybody know? Who is his most favored? It's Palladio. Yay, take a bow. He owns 4 copies of the 16th century great architect, Andreas Palladio. Palladio designed these amazing villas. Most of them survive in Vicenza, outside Venice. Palladio is the first architect to take cathedral's not the right word, you'd think Gothic, to take ecclesiastical architecture off of temples in Rome and put it on domestic buildings. Think pillars, think pediments. That's all Palladio. It had never been done before Palladio. That was Roman temples. You did that on a religious building. You didn't do it at your house. Palladio changes the course of architecture, and then it's caught up in Georgian England, right? I mean, you look at Washington, D.C., that's Jefferson influencing the architecture of Washington based on Palladio. So who does Jefferson worship? He has 4 copies. These are really expensive books at that time. By the way, his library is the foundation of the Library of Congress. Everybody knows that. Greatest private library in the entire Western Hemisphere. Sells it to Congress after the British burn Washington for cents on the dollar. And then he says, I can't live without books, and he starts another library. Anyhow, Palladio, the second thing I don't forgive him for, he's traveling around France, he's looking at vineyards, he's helping peasant women. He gets to Turin. Any of you who know northern Italy, Turin is maybe 2 days ride, 20 miles. It's not very far from Vicenza, where the greatest concentration of Palladio's architecture is. And he doesn't go and see Palladio's architecture. How could you do that? And of course, people say to me, how would Monticello be different if he'd seen it? Have any of you been to Villa Rotonda or seen some of Palladio? Yeah, yeah. Monticello would have been even more expensive, and he would have died deeper in debt. But it would have been even better.
All right, those are 2 pretty good things. All right, so it is 7:28. I am committed, but we're going to take at least one group question. Somebody says, God, I have the best question in this room. Come on, somebody who really a great question. Ta-da.
So how did Jefferson balance all men are created equal via slavery? I mean, it's just the dichotomy there is just mind-blowing.
So you can believe something. Oh, the question was, and it's the question that fueled me from my first day at Monticello. How do we help people make sense of this? We must talk about slavery. We must make sure people understand this was a slave plantation. And it's the inherent contradiction that is inherent at Monticello. It's also inherent in our country, right? So, the best and the worst of our country is right there at Monticello. So he writes these words, and he believes them. I'm not sure that he would have thought the term man applied to women. We have to understand language. That's why we've changed language about enslaved peoples. Language conveys a lot. But he says to Lafayette, when Lafayette returns to Monticello on his victory trip, 1824. So the revolution was 76 to, Lafayette comes back and does this amazing victory lap through the colonies, having been the 19-year-old hero of the revolution for Washington. And Lafayette says, you still have slaves. This isn't what we fought for. And Jefferson says, I think it's going to have to be the work of another generation. So I think for Jefferson, there's a difference between what we're going to aspire to do and how we can make it happen. And I'm not telling you that that's right. I'm not going to tell you what to think about Thomas Jefferson. He is endlessly complicated and fascinating. But I think we have to look inside ourselves and that we all balance things that don't necessarily line up. And how do we come to terms with that? Can we have one more question?
Do we have one more question? Over here.
Talk about Jefferson's animosity with John Adams and the coincidence of them dying on the same day.
The quote I love is, you and I ought not to die without having explained ourselves to one another. And the letters between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, when they have reconciled in their old age, are among the most amazing correspondence between any of our politicians or public figures. So I invite you to take a look and read them. Jefferson and Adams are very different personalities. Adams actually was invited to write the Declaration. And do you know why he turned it down? I'm going to paraphrase, okay? I'm hated, I'm not liked, I'm too much of a loudmouth, I make my opinions. He's alienated too many people in the Continental Congress. And Jefferson, ever the Southern gentleman, did not do that. Jefferson was also 33. He had not been front and center. He didn't like to be a public speaker. He was a brilliant, brilliant writer. And he was from Virginia, and Adams knew that. He knew that for this to succeed, no different than today, the senator from here, the senator, he knew that to get this through the Continental Congress, they needed a powerful spokesman from the South to pull those Southern colonies, right? Adams is Massachusetts. They're the firebrands. They've had the Tea Party. They've had Hancock. They've had all that stuff going on up there. They knew they could not pull this off without strong Virginia. Virginia and Massachusetts are the two biggest colonies. You know, I mean, we don't think about that now, but they were the North, literally the North and South poles. And what does, oh God, I'm going to forget his name right now. The famous doctor from Philadelphia calls John Adams and Thomas Jefferson the North and South poles of the Revolution. And he's the one who gets them back together. So you asked about their animosity. They become enemies when Adams faces Jefferson as his presidential foe in the election of 1800. And Jefferson wins, right? So Adams only got one term. Adams followed Washington, didn't get a second term. Jefferson defeated him. It took 47 votes in Congress to finally, because it was very, very close. But it was a bitter. And Abigail didn't forgive Jefferson for some of the things he said about Adams. And then, of course, time goes on, and it's, you know, friends, try to get them back together. And finally, it's kind of like something in high school. You know, Jefferson says to this friend in Philadelphia who's trying to get them together, well, he won't, I mean, if I wrote him, he wouldn't write me back. Well, that's a terrible smear, right? And so they're each like, well, I couldn't. And so finally, Jefferson writes Abigail. And she, boy, does she tell him what she thinks of him. Abigail is amazing. Abigail, in another time, would have been a president. And John knew that. John Adams, as you know from David McCullough's work. So it's Abigail who kind of triangulates and with another mutual friend, and then you and I ought not to die without having explained ourselves to one. And then they have this amazing, deep friendship that re-emerges near the ends of their lives. Adams thinks Jefferson is still alive on the 4th when he dies. He does not know that Jefferson has predeceased him. They both die on the 50th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration. Adams is furious that July 4th is honored because he thought it would be July 2nd when he had put the thing into Congress, and he's never gotten over that Jefferson got all the credit for July 4th. I mean, Adams is a little petty. But he admits it. I love somebody who could admit it. Look at their portraits. I've been working on a book on the Fine Arts Collection at the White House, and the portrait of Adams and the portrait of Jefferson just say everything. Adams is, and Jefferson is just visionary and serene. I guess what I would say about that, and maybe it's a good end to my remarks, I'm sorry I keep talking so long. The country needed these differences. They needed this band of brilliant people who did not get along, Hamilton and Jefferson. Most people don't know that, but for Jefferson, Washington came very close to being made a king. It was Jefferson who stopped that. Adams, Hamilton, he didn't have sons, right? Washington had no sons. So they thought, we can make him a king, because there won't be any inherit, like, it'll be fine. When he finally dies, we'll figure it out. And Jefferson was like, no, this isn't what we fought for. And John Meacham agrees with me. I mean, I'm not just telling you that out of Leslie Bowman. We came this close to having a king. Maybe not ever as close again until now, but Jefferson stopped it. And he'll not, you know, that's not something you might think about. But these men, they were not in a, but they knew how to talk to each other. They couldn't just tribalize off on their digital worlds and only talk to the people who loved them. They had to make it work for the sake of the country. And I think that's a lesson Congress could use now.
Whoa, all right. All right. Leslie will linger if anyone has a question. I was assumed Leslie would want me to tell you that Sunday, Ken Burns' American Revolution documentary series starts on PBS for all of us. So please thank her again. This is great. Thank you all for coming to the annual meeting. She will linger, and Eric will send us off.
Can we also get a quick round of applause for Nanette Messajuns for arranging tonight? Thank you very much. So with this, we conclude our 2025 annual membership meeting. We are looking to open around April 1st for the museum, so please come check out the new museums. Also, please take the the America 250 material on your table and look to participate in all those activities as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence next year. And if you are a person that's interested in astronomy, make sure you look at the sky on the way out, because we have a very magnificent, spectacular event tonight. So from right here, it's starting to kick up a little bit. But if you want to stay up until 10 o'clock, yeah, that works. Once again, thank you very much for coming this evening, and thank you for your generous support of the Granville Historical Society. Have a good evening. Paul Jane, would you like me to walk you home?